Welcome to Cheat Sheet Tales, where secrets slip, lies unravel, and the truth always has a twist. Real stories, raw confessions, shocking betrayals. Drop a comment if you've ever caught a red flag too late. Now, let's get into today's tale. No man will ever respect you, Dad mocked. On my first day at the firm, 10 years later, his startup was about to go under. As I walked into the pitch room, I smiled and said, "Remember me, Dad? I'm the lead investor." He looked so small, sitting at the other end of the table, the man who used to tower over every room he entered, whose voice could flatten me with a single comment, was now nervously adjusting his cufflinks, avoiding eye contact. I could see the recognition bloom in his face the moment I walked in, carrying the confidence he had once told me would never get me anywhere. He blinked like I was a ghost, but I wasn't. I was very much alive, very much real, and I was here to watch him squirm. And years ago, I had stood in a boardroom not unlike this one, clutching a leather folder too tightly, my heels too stiff, my voice too uncertain. He'd looked at me with something between pity and contempt. I remember every word. "No man will ever respect you. You're emotional. You think this world will bend because you're smart and idealistic. It will eat you alive." That day, I learned that being underestimated by strangers stung, but being crushed by someone you love, that left a wound so deep, it became a map I followed for the next decade. Now here we were, his startup bleeding out, his co-founders absent, and his only hope for a lifeline sitting across from him, legs crossed, pen poised, calm as a glacier. I didn't need revenge. I didn't even want an apology. I wanted to be seen clearly, fully, without condescension or dismissal. I wanted him to know exactly who I had become without him, and exactly how much it cost me to get here. It was the summer of 2015, and I had just landed an internship at Vanley Capital, the kind of boutique investment firm in Chicago, where glass walls and cold brew machines disguised a culture that hadn't evolved much past 1985. Everyone there had the same haircut and handshake, the same empty smile and judgmental gaze. I wasn't exactly welcomed. But what made it worse was that my father worked there. Not as just some mid-level exec. He was one of the founding partners. I thought that meant something. I thought maybe, after all the years of silence and stone-faced parenting, this would be our bridge. We'd lost my mother the year before. Pancreatic cancer took her quickly, and my father took it quietly, too quietly, while I cried in the shower and tried to hold our household together. He buried himself in quarterly reports and stock forecasts. It wasn't grief. It was a retreat, and once I started at Vanley, I realized he hadn't just retreated from Mom's death. He'd retreated from me too. On my first day, he introduced me to the team with all the warmth of a voicemail. "This is my daughter Mira," he said. "She's doing a temporary rotation here." That was it. No mention of my MBA, of graduating with honors, of anything I had accomplished on my own. Just temporary, like I was a misplaced intern. Not his blood. The weeks that followed were brutal. I was constantly left out of meetings, passed over, for real assignments, handed coffee runs and spreadsheet formatting instead of deal analysis. And the worst part? My father watched it all happen. He let it happen. Once, I tried to present an idea during a weekly review and was met with eye rolls and silence. My father cut in after a long pause and said, "Let's let the senior team speak now, Mira." Just like that, he silenced me. He humiliated me. And later that day, he dropped that infamous line in his office, just the two of us. "No man will ever respect you." He said it like a fact, like a curse, as if I should just accept it and step aside. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just left his office, and 2 weeks later, I left the firm. I moved out of the Gold Coast apartment I shared with him and rented a tiny walk-up near Logan Square. I found work at a little-known firm run by a woman named Inez Varela, who had built her empire from scratch, She saw something in me my father never did. She mentored me without belittling me, challenged me without tearing me down. Over the years, I stopped waiting for my father to call. I stopped hoping he'd say I was wrong. I built my own career, my own network, my own damn firm. Argent Bloom Capital was my baby. And I raised it with a kind of relentless devotion that came from always having something to prove. When the new Thrive pitch packet landed on my desk, I nearly didn't open it. I thought, no, hoped, it was a coincidence. But there, it was, in bold letters on the slide deck. Founder and CEO Raymond. I laughed out loud, not because it was funny, but because life is cruelly poetic. New Thrive was barely keeping its head above water. Their tech was outdated, their outreach weak, and their user base stagnant. They needed funding fast. Their last hope, an investor with fresh capital, a growth vision, and the stomach to bet on a has-been executive chasing relevance. My team flagged the pitch as a likely pass, but I told them. To schedule the meeting, they asked why. I just said, because I know the founder. I want to hear his pitch personally. The morning of the meeting, I dressed with intention. Nothing flashy, but undeniably authoritative. A slate gray suit, subtle jewelry, and red lipstick. Not too bright, but bold enough. The color my father once called unprofessional. When I stepped into the boardroom and saw him sitting there, the moment was cinematic. He looked up slowly. Recognition flickered across his face like a bad memory. "Mira," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "Mr. Beringer," I said evenly, sitting down across from him. "I'm the lead investor." There was a long silence. He blinked like he didn't believe me. I opened my folder, reviewing the executive summary with clinical precision. "I see your burn rate is unsustainable, and your CAC to LTV ratio is upside down," I said. "You're not retaining users, and your Series A terms were overly generous, which puts any new investor in a vulnerable position. Can you explain your plan to turn that around?" He stumbled over his words. I didn't interrupt. I just watched. Let him sweat. "You built this?" he asked quietly, after a few failed attempts at spin. "This firm?" I nodded. "Every piece of it." Another silence. Then he laughed. Dry, empty. "Guess you proved me wrong." I raised an eyebrow. "Is that what you think this is about?" He didn't answer. I didn't press. Instead, I continued dismantling his proposal piece by piece. I asked about user behavior metrics, privacy protocols, accessibility, features. He deflected, backpedaled, tried to lean on brand name and legacy relationships. I didn't flinch. And at one point, when he tried to interrupt my CTO mid-sentence, I said, "Please don't cut her off. She's answering the question I asked." That's when I saw it. The look of someone who realized the world had moved on without them, that his time was over, and mine had just begun. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted the water bottle in front of him. The pitch meeting had only just begun, but the unraveling was already visible. He wasn't just unprepared, he was exposed. Every question I asked cut deeper, not because I intended to hurt him, but because he'd built New Thrive on outdated models, egotism, and assumptions that no longer applied to the world of business, or to me. "You've allocated 40% of your last round to Elliot Kreneading, but there's no campaign performance data here," I said. "Was that an oversight, or?" He cleared his throat. "We've been focused on platform optimization. The data is coming in late." I didn't nod. I didn't give him any affirming gestures or saving grace. I just made a note in the margin of my printed deck. In my peripheral vision, I could see him watching me, waiting for a crack in the armor. He didn't find one. I had built Argent Bloom brick by brick. Yes, but I'd also built this version of myself. It wasn't armor. It was bone. Reinforced over 10 years of being dismissed, talked over, underestimated, and disrespected. I wasn't playing with confidence anymore. I was confident. He looked across the table at my managing partner, Taryn Shaw, as if hoping she might offer a warmer reception. But Taryn Shaw, brilliant and no-nonsense, met him with the same analytical gaze. "We've seen better metrics from pre-seed startups," she said, flipping a page. He flinched, and still I remained silent, letting the numbers do the talking, letting the silence between us grow thick enough for him to feel all the years of absence, criticism, and silence he had offered me in return for my striving. He tried a different tactic. "Listen, Mira, it's Miss Beringer," I said calmly but firmly. "Let's keep this professional." He blinked like I'd slapped him, but I kept my voice level, my eyes locked on his. "Of course," he muttered, folding his hands. I allowed a pause, then, long enough to make him squirm. I wanted him to feel the discomfort I'd once felt under his scrutiny. When I'd offered ideas only to be cut off, when I'd worked late nights, trying to prove I deserved to be in the room, only for him to pretend I was a guest instead of his own flesh and blood, his co-founder. A man I didn't know. Someone named Elliot Crane finally spoke up, sensing the meeting was slipping. New Thrive was designed to fill a crucial gap in the wellness, Elliot Crane said, particularly for executives and professionals facing burnout. "We believe with the right pivot," Taryn Shaw cut in, "the wellness app space is oversaturated. You're not targeting a niche, and your interface hasn't been updated in over a year. What differentiates you?" They stumbled. I stayed quiet. My silence had weight, now power, and I was using it with precision. After several more rounds of questions, we called a 5-minute break. The team filed out to stretch and reset, and I lingered behind, knowing he'd follow me into the hallway. "Wait," he said, catching up with me near the window that overlooked the city skyline. "You're really not going to invest?" It wasn't a question. It was a realization, a confession. I turned to face him. "Tell me something, Dad. Did you ever believe in me, even once?" His mouth opened, then closed. He looked at the skyline like the answer was out there somewhere in the gray-blue haze. "I thought I was protecting you," he said finally. "The world is brutal, Mira, especially in finance. I didn't want you to get crushed." I shook my head slowly. "No, you just didn't want to see me succeed on my own terms. You were afraid of what it meant if I could do this without becoming like you." He ran a hand down his face. "Maybe I didn't know how to be a father after your mother died. Maybe I was afraid of everything." The vulnerability almost got to me. Almost. But it was too late for sentiment. We weren't in a hospital room. We were in a boardroom, and this wasn't therapy. "I didn't come here to rehash the past," I said, stepping away. "I came to evaluate an investment, and based on what I've seen, New Thrive isn't viable." He nodded once, slowly accepting it. His eyes looked older now. Not just from age, but from loss. Loss of time, of connection, of pride. As we returned to the room, the energy shifted. Everyone could feel it. The co-founder kept glancing at Raymond, unsure whether to take the lead or retreat. Raymond kept his eyes down, and I took over the final segment of the pitch. It wasn't really about New Thrive anymore. It was about control, who had it, who lost it, and who learned to wield it with grace instead of spite. I asked 2 final questions, both calculated. "Why didn't you bring in someone with stronger technical leadership?" "We didn't think we needed it at the time," he replied, voice low. "And do you think that now?" He met my eyes. Yes. It wasn't enough. Not for investment, but it was something. Still, I gave no hint of what I was thinking. My team took notes. I thanked them for their time and told them we'd be in touch. Raymond lingered as the others gathered their things. I offered no final words, no warm goodbye, just a nod. The kind of nod you give a peer you once knew but no longer recognize. As the door closed behind him, Terrence Shaw turned to me and said, "That was intense." I just stared at the empty chair he'd occupied. Yeah, it was. And still, the meeting wasn't the end. It was the middle of something much more complicated, something that had started long before New Thrive, long before Vanley even, long before I'd known what ROI stood for. The meeting had cracked something open in both of us. But cracks don't always lead to healing. Sometimes they just let the truth in. We didn't invest that evening. I sent a carefully worded decline. My team reviewed it, and I stripped it of any personal tone. I made sure it was professional, measured, impartial, and consistent with our firm's voice. But behind that neutral language was a lifetime of hurt, finally returning to its sender. It read, "After thorough consideration, Argent Bloom Capital has decided not to move forward with an investment in New Thrive. While we respect the founding, team's experience and vision, our analysis indicates a misalignment with our firm's current investment strategy and impact thesis. We wish you the best as you explore future funding opportunities. Sincerely, Mira Beringer, Managing Partner, Argent Bloom Capital." I hit send. Then I sat in the quiet of my office and let it all catch up to me. Not revenge, the release I had waited a decade for, that moment. But it wasn't a cinematic outburst. It wasn't some tear-filled reconciliation or vicious takedown. It was silent authority. The kind of power my father once hoarded like oxygen, now wielded by me with restraint. That was the real revenge. I didn't need to destroy him. I needed him to watch me thrive in spite of everything he denied me. Weeks passed. The pitch meeting became just another entry in our CRM system, another pass. But emotionally, it lingered longer than I expected. Not like an open wound, but like a healed scar you still catch in the mirror sometimes. Then, on a gray Thursday in March, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I let it ring, then I listened to the voicemail. "Mira, it's your father. I'm not calling to ask for anything. I wanted to say I'm sorry. I've said those words to a lot of people over the years, but I've never said them to the one person I hurt most. You were right about everything. I didn't believe in you because I didn't believe in myself. I wasn't strong enough to raise a daughter who didn't need me. But I'm proud of you, even if you don't want to hear it." I needed to say it. He hung up without saying goodbye. I didn't return the call, not right away. It wasn't that I was angry. I wasn't. Not anymore. But healing doesn't need applause. Forgiveness doesn't require contact. Instead, I moved forward. I hired 2 more women to join our senior investment team. One was a young analyst from the South Side who reminded me of myself in every way. Sharp, underestimated, passionate. The other was a brilliant tech strategist who had taken 2 years off to raise twins and was struggling to re-enter the workforce. "People think time away is a liability," she told me in the interview. I smiled. "Around here, we call it perspective." A few months later, I read that New Thrive had been acquired by a mid-tier health tech company. It wasn't a fire sale, but it wasn't a win either. Enough to recoup investor scraps, not enough to resurrect a legacy. My father apparently stepped away quietly. I heard through back channels he was consulting at a small firm in Evanston. Nothing high profile, just enough to keep him busy. I thought about reaching out. I even wrote an email once. I never sent it because the truth is, he wasn't the point anymore.